Just a quick mention. Got a lot going on next week on the program. On Monday, of course, Randy Staples will be joining us. Tuesday, Steve Millington. Wednesday, 9 o'clock, I have some folks from We the People here in the Magic Valley in studio at 9 o'clock. Also coming up at 8:30 Wednesday morning, we have the folks from Tripp Family Medicine joining us. Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. I do want to remind you, Dr. Tripp's office is still looking for new patients. And as a patient, when you wake up in the morning and if you have some issues, medical issues, they can often see you on the very same day. There's no wait of a month or 3 weeks. You can often, that is often is the common word there, the right word. Doesn't mean always, but generally they can see you on the very same day. Tripp Family Medicine located on Fillmore Street in Twin Falls, directly across from the main post office. And remember as well, life's too short not to feel good. Thank you for joining me this morning. Bill Colley on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I've been sharing with you some of the responses from some of the angry leftists in this country after the Communist Court of Appeals in California ruled against President Trump last night, continuing the stay of his refugee pause from 7 dangerous countries. This is Sydney. Was it Sydney? Well, no. Which Blumenthal is it? There's a number of Blumenthals in government. This is the guy who is the senator from Connecticut. The guy who claimed he served in Vietnam when he never did, and yet his voters there continue to send him back because, well, he's a fellow traveler, and they're fellow travelers. He is firing back at Mr. Trump. And again, leftists just feel we should open the doors and let potential terrorists into this country because, well, they have something in common with terrorists. They hate America.
The court's analysis is very powerful, and ultimately, this victory for the rule of law shows that courts will not be bullied by threats or personal invective and insults, and that is a very, very strong victory for our constitutional system. Put aside that it upholds the rights of individuals who may be affected by the due process or Establishment Clause violations here.
And the raging liberals are just having a celebration dance right now, including the governor of our neighboring state of Washington, Jay Inslee, sometimes compared to the character of Droopy Dog.
We have to make these decisions based on evidence. The courts did it. I'm glad they did. I'm glad our state has stood up and led the nation yet again.
Really, he's the governor of Seattle and what? Tacoma? And that's about it. Maybe Olympia. You know, nobody in eastern Washington state supports that kook. And again, the way that the court stood up for the evidence. No, the evidence is the president has the right to do this, the legal right to do this. And yet media doesn't say, well, okay, Governor, what is that evidence? Media doesn't say, media's job should be to say, defend that. It's like the other day when that freak Chuck Schumer, he was saying that the president has violated the Constitution numerous times. Nobody in the media gaggle said, well, explain which times, Senator. Cite them. Give us, he's a lawyer, give us your legal citations of where these violations have happened. Because if you ask him that question, then he can't explain it. Yet the fellow travelers in media say, oh, sounds good to me. Let's just amplify that and repeat it over and over and over again, and maybe the American people will buy into it. Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I mentioned earlier the Ninth Circuit, this is from the Daily Caller, its reversal rate is 80% when its cases go to the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, Trey Gowdy, who was a federal prosecutor in South Carolina, you know, Gowdy is actually on one of those crime networks. I forget which one it was. I was watching it one night, an old, and it must have been a dozen years old, an old documentary about a crime came up, and there's Trey Gowdy sitting there talking when he was still serving as federal prosecutor. He said this, quote, seems clear judges are neither in a position practically or jurisprudentially to second-guess national security determinations made by a commander-in-chief. There is a reason we elect the commander-in-chief and do not elect federal judges, unquote. 736-0300, the number to reach our program. We're at 8:38. You're up next. You're on the air.
Yeah, good morning, Bill. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I appreciate it. You know, that deal you did with Waters World a little bit ago says it all. Our kids nowadays, not all of them, my kids aren't that way, but I know of a lot of them. They're, like you said, are ignorant. They're looking for the lazy way out. They've listened to liberals now for 20, 30 years, giving away welfare, murdering babies. It's a free land. Do what you want to do. It doesn't matter. Well, let's slip back to the 1800s when it was Republican president, Mr. Lincoln, that freed the slaves. Let's flip forward to World War II, when a Democrat president locked up all the Japanese in the country, put them in internment camps. Everybody was just great and okie dokie with that. But now all they're trying to do, pardon me, Bill?
We have a lot of people out there who have, it's like they're complaining about Kellyanne Conway yesterday for promoting Ivanka Trump's designer clothing line. Yet in November, Michelle Obama told an interviewer, she said, I look forward to using my position to promote clothing lines that I like.
Sure. But see, that's the thing, Bill. Everything for a liberal, no matter what it is going to take the easy way out. Because first, they're lazy. They're extraordinarily lazy. Number two, they cannot think for themselves. They've got to do what somebody else has got to do everything for them. See, and that's what we've got. Big Chucky Schumer. I mean, you talk about a freaking moron. He is the essence of moron.
Well, I got to let you run on that one, but I like that. The essence of morons. I wish we had a syndicated audience. We could share that one with everybody across the country. Thank you much for the telephone call. It's 8:40. We're at 43. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX. Gun Talk coming up after 9 o'clock news. Pat Buchanan has a rundown in his column today about the number of times presidents have disparaged courts in this country, and it goes back to Thomas Jefferson. It just, Mr. Trump is harming the integrity of the courts. How about Barack Obama when he was doing his State of the Union speech and he called out the Supreme Court members who were sitting there in the front rows, and you actually saw one of the Supreme Court members mouth the response that basically was telling the president where he could go. But see, again, this is the media's selective cherry picking of history. They complain about Conway, who they say is trying to promote Ivanka Trump's clothing line on a television program yesterday when Michelle Obama was doing the same thing last November. Oh, well, what are you talking about? I was off on vacation that day. Yeah, I didn't hear that. You conservatives must be making it up. No, it's right here in the record. I need new glasses. I can't read it. Trump is bad. He's mean. Well, excuse me. Let's go back and look at what President Obama said in that State of the Union address. Well, the State of the Union, there's 50 states. No, I said State of the Union address. The address, I'm at 1616 Swahili Lane. Yeah. Zip code 94127. 844. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Thank you for listening this morning. If you're having difficulty tuning into the show, though, it may actually be what's going on between your ears. And we've been telling you for a number of months about our friends at Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert. And there are many choices, obviously, available for hearing healthcare. Why would you choose Mount Harrison Audiology? Well, independence. Mount Harrison Audiology is the only independent, locally owned hearing healthcare practice in southern Idaho. That means more choices for treatment than just one brand and lower cost. Trust your hearing to a certified audiologist. Call Mount Harrison Audiology for your appointment today. Dr. Christine Pickup's number is 208-312-0957. That's 312-0957. Speaking of telephone numbers, if you'd like to reach our program today, 736-0300, 736-0300, and you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX.
Yeah, Bill, you just look at California, and then they're deporting this Hispanic lady who broke the law, and we're all supposed to feel sorry for her, and it's not the American way. Isn't that the thing they always say? The American way is to provide safety and an economy for people who have jobs, who own businesses, who want to pursue the American dream.
You bring up a good point, because the previous caller referenced American citizens of Japanese ancestry who were locked up, some of them just a few miles away from this studio during World War II. And liberals say that's not the American way, but the liberal icon, their version of what the way conservatives feel about Ronald Reagan, their version is Franklin Roosevelt. And he did it because he thought it was necessary for the safety, security, and survival of this country during World War II. Well, we've been in World War III since September 11th, 15 years ago.
Exactly. And so the thing of it is is, there's an endless supply of these useful idiots, and you just get so tired of it. But I just don't think, no matter how hard they try and how much money Soros pours in or whoever else, that they're going to get any real traction, because as Trump goes about his business, the people that voted for him become more encouraged. More and more people realize that he is doing what he said, and they are coming into his side of the thought in the camp. And so, I think that his popularity, even though it may be, they say, whatever you want to believe about the polls, I believe his popularity in the grassroots areas of America is growing, and maybe faster than anybody would think. And then one more quick thing about Curt Schilling running against Elizabeth Warren,
Yes.
which could be interesting. I'll hang up. Thanks.
Yeah, Curt Schilling is truly a great American, and we know a lot about Curt Schilling's, just his grit. Here's a guy who had, his heel stitched together so he could go out and pitch in a World Series game, blood running down into his shoe and staining his sock, and he did his job. That's what Curt Schilling is all about. That moment should tell us the measure of that man. And then you've got Pocahontas claiming that she has indigenous ancestry when she obviously doesn't. So we already know what her character is. She made that lie up so she could get a job at a prestigious university. And then you've got Curt Schilling, who went out and did his job one night with a staple basically in his heel, and while he's bleeding while he's doing it. Liberals don't understand this sort of thing because, well, as long as the lie got you the job, cool. 8:49. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Supreme Court ruling way back in 1982. United States Supreme Court ruling said that there is no right to come live in the United States. There is no right. And the liberals would have us bring all 7 billion people around the planet here so they could have a better life. If you whatever lack of logic they have, extrapolate from that. And let's go that direction. And as I brought up earlier, these migrants who were flowing into Europe by the millions in the last couple of years, they were sailing across on these boats from North Africa. And if there were Christian migrants on the boat, the Muslims were throwing them overboard and drowning them. Now, think about that. They're come to this country, and all of the liberals out there. You had a liberal who was running last year against Stephen Hartkin for State House of Representatives, and she kept mouthing the words, we aren't that kind of people. She's all for this sort of thing. She and her husband, he sits on the city council here in Twin Falls. They love this sort of stuff. Well, maybe they're not very Christian, but what do you think you're going to do? Bring thousands, tens of thousands of these people in here, and if they've been throwing people overboard in boats because of their Christianity, how are they eventually going to treat their Christian and Jewish neighbors when they get here? Oh, they haven't done anything wrong yet. Well, not yet. Not yet. And when you get larger and larger numbers of them here, then what happens? Well, we're not that kind of people. Well, we'll be dead people then, won't we? Are we that kind of people? Well, we eventually all will be, but should we all go early to appease these people? 8:50. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. The useful idiots are amongst us. They are serving on our city council. They're trying to get into our state legislature, and we allow it. That's the other part of this. And they're very nice at the cocktail parties. So I don't know why you bring that up. I bring it up because they shouldn't be anywhere near a public microphone or a public podium or anywhere near the levers of government. 42 right now. And we're looking at a high temperature. Not much warmer today and down into the upper 30s over the course of the weekend, but plenty of sunshine on the way. 736-0300, the number to reach us. You're listening to News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. You're up next, and you're on the air.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. I really like the idea the gentleman from Jerome said to instruct the Attorney General to serve the 4 judges with impeachment papers.
Right.
I can't remember all the facts of what he said. The impeachment papers was the reason for that. Was it obstruction of justice?
I had a story somewhere in my pile here this morning, and if I could dig it out, it actually gives a rundown of what you can remove judges for.
Oh, could you maybe post that online so we could look it up? I think we should
I'll try.
bombard our representatives with.
I have about 50 pieces of 50 different stories and opinion pieces here in front of me today. I'll have to dig through that.
Okay,
but
that'd be wonderful.
Thank you, and I'll see what I can do about that. Getting it up perhaps later today if I can dig it out of all of this. This is not uncommon. There have been, these people have been removed before from the federal bench. Elsie Hastings in Florida. I think that was more corruption that was the cause for it. And then he got himself elected to Congress by the liberals there in his district. Hey, he's a criminal, so am I. Birds of a feather, we flock together. But there can be a number of things that you could go forward with on this. And I think, number one, they did not rule on the merits of this case. The questions they were asking about Donald Trump's motives, his motives are irrelevant in all of this. He followed the statute and he made the call. And so you could approach them on that. Number one, I guess, for just politicizing their decision. And that's not what their job is. And just bring them up on those charges alone. We have another telephone caller with us. You're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
Yeah, Bill, this is Stone Age Man.
Yes.
You were saying that there's a guy on city council that's in favor of the refugees, and
there's
I
probably
can't
a lot
remember
of
if
them.
it was.
There's probably a lot. There's probably a lot of them, but it was Councilor Talkington because his wife, when she was running for State House of Representatives, she was beating the drum for refugee resettlement.
Yeah, and did I hear you say once that the Mormon Church and the Catholic Church are both in favor of refugees?
Well,
in Twin Falls,
I think that the way to probably define that, a better way to define that would be to say that the official policy of both those churches, and actually of a great many Christian churches, is that we need to be compassionate and we need to protect these people if they're living in harm's way. But I think that if you actually sit down and you break it down, I think that church leadership would say we also have to be wary of opening the doors to bad people. So I'll put it this way. A lot of the charities that are involved are only loosely associated with these churches, whether they be Roman Catholic charities or Lutheran charities, are loosely affiliated with their churches any longer. And those people are making a big buck off of refugee resettlement. So they're doing it for that reason. But I think that ultimately, I think most churches stand up for the notion that we have the right to defend ourselves against the bad guys.
Yeah, so I got a quick question for you. Just stab in the dark for you. The city of Twin Falls or Twin Falls County, what would you guess might be the ratio of people in favor of the refugees, getting packed into Twin Falls County and those against?
I would say about 20% are probably wholeheartedly in favor of this, and they all mainly live within Twin Falls city limits, and they live over there on the northern and eastern edge of the city in the really nice neighborhoods. And all of the people they'd like to resettle here are all being moved onto the west side in some of the older neighborhoods or the south side, so that they don't actually have to rub shoulders with the people who want them here, unless those people want them to come up and clean their pools and mow their lawns and do those sorts of things.
Okay, Bill, thanks a lot.
I thank you much for the telephone call, sir. It's 8:55. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We're at 43. Got to wrap this hour up shortly. We're going to be talking about firearms in hour number 2 of the program. Todd Eccles from Patriot Defense, if he got out of his driveway this morning, is scheduled to join us. We'll talk a little bit about that. He's had some experiences with some water out there in that area around Buell and not really all of western Twin Falls County. There's a story on our website this morning. County commissioners, of course, had declared a state of emergency in Twin Falls County, and we have not obviously given this story justice on my program. I admit that. We've just got so much going on in so little time. And I admit, if you live where I do in Twin Falls, speaking of those pompous people who live on the north side of the city, I'm among them. We don't have a lot of worries because, well, there's a 600-foot deep ditch running by my neighborhood, and all of the high water runs into that, so we don't have that issue just directly in my line of sight. But I realize there are a lot of people in some parts of the county who are dealing with some very serious flooding issues. And in broadcasting, we try to find the biggest part of the audience, so a lot of us may not necessarily be dealing with that. But I got to acknowledge that there are people out there who are going through. I mean, anybody who's ever had to deal with just water in the basement knows that's bad enough. But some people are dealing with it far worse right now. And the state issued a point yesterday, the state of Idaho, that the emergency officials are really concerned that if we get into a really warm stretch, I mean, where it could hit for a few days 65, 70 degrees, and then you throw some rain on top of that, there's so much snow still up in the mountains. Well, you could be dealing with some tremendous, tremendous flood issues in some areas, and they're already letting some water out of some of the reservoirs in order to try and to take a little of the pressure off. The good side of this, because there's at least the silver lining in this cloud, is that there are not going to be too many worries about providing water for everyone this summer. The drought conditions across the entire western part of this country are gone now, including a neighboring California, where just a couple of years ago the governor was saying, "Oh, global warming means we're going to be living in a desert here for the rest of our lives," and then voila, a couple of years later. Funny, the mainstream media and Governor Brown aren't up in the mountains of California right now issuing warnings. You know why? Because the snow's about 25 feet deep up there. It's 8:58. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. Short break coming up. News as well from Fox News Channel at 9 o'clock. And one more hour of Top Story today. And yes, we're going to be talking about firearms. A great way to defend yourself. Well, you never know when those Berkeley liberals could drift into Idaho for a little summer hiking and could decide to attack you. You've got to be ready.